The world where Eridan couldn't find you. What was it like?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you.
Try me.
People there had metal in their heads. Waged war from a distance, using things similar to megascopes. And there were no horses. Everyone had their own flying ship instead.
Siri, stop fooling around.
Told you wouldn't believe me.
Approximately 3 years ahead of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt's May 2015 release, Polish game developer CD Projekt RED announced plans to develop a AAA project based on Mike Pondsmith's Cyberpunk pen and paper RPG. Studio co-founder Marcin Iwiński promised the then-unnamed game would boast all the hallmarks of the Witcher series, its design molded with mature and demanding players in mind. The development team and Pondsmith expressed their confidence in the title's ability to set a new standard for futuristic role-playing games, with high production value serving as the most significant goal. No one could have anticipated how short the resulting product would fall from expectations. After a lengthy period of silence, the marketing blitz for Cyberpunk 2077 got off to an incredible start in June 2018, courtesy of an E3 presentation that would fuel years of hype and millions of pre-order purchases. Not even multiple delays and an eventually admitted lack of transparency could curtail interest, not when the neon-drenched streets of Night City and a Keanu Reeves-starring narrative seemed so enticing. Upon launch, however, the glitz and glamour faded, obscured by missing textures, game-breaking performance issues, and a litany of other glitches that ruined the experience for players on consoles and high-end PCs. Those who spent 8 years awaiting Cyberpunk 2077 were gifted a skeleton of CD Projekt RED's vision, one so marred by mismanagement that the company's hard-fought reputation seemingly plummeted overnight. Should the team find a way to right its myriad wrongs, many will still remember this once ambitious endeavor for having one of the most disastrous launches in video game history. This is the tragedy of Cyberpunk 2077. Having found solace in Mike Pondsmith's pen and paper RPG during the Iron Curtain era that divided Europe post-World War II, CD Projekt RED developers contacted the Cyberpunk creator in hopes of reimagining his opus in digital form. Pondsmith eventually agreed, telling Glixel the crew's technical capabilities and knowledge of Cyberpunk lore impressed him above all else. Thus, the seed that would blossom into Cyberpunk 2077 was planted in a hopeful exchange between a tabletop game designer and talented fans who knew a thing or two about game design themselves. After teasing the adaptation at its summer conference in May 2012, CD Projekt formally announced the Cyberpunk 2077 title that following October. January 2013 marked its real coming-out party, with a teaser trailer offering a first look at the studio's vision. The trailer depicted a specialized task force, MaxTac, closing in on a woman whose cybernetic implants had become severely uncontrollable. It painted a grim picture of the in-game world, futuristic yet dystopian, technologically advanced yet careening out of control. As far as initial impressions were concerned, The Witcher developer had captured the audience's attention. By this point, though, the sci-fi adventure existed in concept only. Pre-production in its earliest phase began in 2013, led by a team comprised of about 50 people, the vast majority of them Witcher veterans. Once The Witcher 3's Blood and Wine DLC shipped in the summer of 2016, the crew entered pre-production on Cyberpunk 2077 full speed ahead. A message hidden within the E3 2018 trailer noted the long wait for new details constituted a byproduct of a desire to speak when there was something meaningful and substantial to showcase. And the E3 2018 teaser, as well as the developer interviews accompanying it, provided plenty of substance while merely setting the tone of Night City, a destitute futuristic setting lorded over by megacorporations and gangs. CD Projekt RED took this time to tout Cyberpunk 2077 as a single-player experience replete with customization options. This also marked the point at which the public learned about the title's first-person perspective, news that hopeful players received with trepidation. According to lead designer Kyle Rowley, first-person represented the best way to fully immerse users in Night City's atmosphere. Other external elements such as multiplayer and post-launch DLC additionally received mentions early in the marketing cycle. Level designer Max Pears told Shack News that Cyberpunk 2077's online component was in the R&D phase, with developers working to ensure the mode adhered to the core tenets of the studio. In terms of post-release support, CD Projekt couldn't offer concrete details, but promised a DLC rollout akin to that of The Witcher 3. Amid all this talk, launch-related specifics were limited to the confirmation of PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One support. But a set due date remained under wraps since delivering the RPG when it's ready had become somewhat of a mantra. Nevertheless, uncertainty about a release time didn't slow anticipation amongst eager onlookers. The title won a treasure trove of E3 2018 awards from outlets including Game Informer, IGN, and PC Gamer, for example. Cyberpunk 2077's appearance during the Xbox conference at E3 2019 amplified the excitement tenfold, thanks in part to actor Keanu Reeves taking the stage to tease his casting in the role of Johnny Silverhand and share the April 16, 2020 due date. New information about the single-player campaign surfaced throughout the subsequent months. Yet, news of the multiplayer suite's delay to a nebulous period post-launch set the tenor for the final marketing push. In a January 2020 statement typed on a now notorious bright yellow background, CD Projekt co-founder Marcin Iwiński and head of studio Adam Badowski revealed Cyberpunk 2077's postponement from April 16th to September 17th. While the game existed in a complete and playable state, the complexity of its various systems demanded extra time in the oven, particularly for polish, playtesting, and bug fixes. A similar message hit the web in June, confirming another delay to November 19th. Iwiński and Badowski acknowledged the risk of losing public trust. However, they insisted the extended development cycle would benefit the final product, since there were still glitches and balancing issues to tackle. Unfortunately, the speed with which higher-ups felt the need to deliver these changes came at the cost of a promise to no longer rely on crunch practices. A year prior, Iwiński publicly stated the studio had stamped mandatory overtime out of its operations. Something changed between then and the months leading up to launch. Bloomberg obtained a September 2020 email from Adam Badowski to employees, which detailed a plan of going into overdrive in the final stretch. Because this news directly contradicted previous statements, Badowski willingly accepted the ensuing backlash. The studio head contended that all other options for completing the project on time were exhausted, hence the newly implemented crunch period involving 6-day work weeks. Though a lack of clarity regarding the number of additional mandated hours permeated the conversation, Badowski's response to the Bloomberg report assured every staff member would receive compensation on top of the crew splitting 10% of the company's annual profits. Crunch-related concerns aside, all seemed well in October when Cyberpunk 2077 went gold, meaning it was content complete and ready for disc manufacturing. The studio announced a third delay, approximately 3 weeks later though, an incredibly rare move for a project deemed gold. Upon sharing the new December 10th launch date, Iwiński and Badowski divulged that the biggest challenge stemmed from an attempt to simultaneously ship 9 different versions, including Google Stadia, PC, last-gen, and next-gen consoles. And because of the worldwide pandemic, such a Herculean undertaking had to be managed remotely. The discourse surrounding Cyberpunk 2077 shifted dramatically at release, vacillating from an almost overwhelming level of anticipation to underwhelming reception in a matter of days. The review embargo lifted on December 7th, allowing critics to regale consumers with tales of their Night City exploits. Most reviewers seemed easily won over, barring the GameSpot writer who awarded the RPG a 7 out of 10 and fell victim to online harassment from those who'd yet to venture into the open world. But the experience that enjoyed predominantly high marks was played on PC per CD Projekt, which also prohibited outlets and influencers who received review copies from sharing gameplay footage not captured by the developer. No one could have predicted the poor state of the base PS4 and Xbox One versions that had long eluded the public eye. At launch, console players, specifically last-gen hardware users, encountered a litany of bugs, several of which made the futuristic RPG unplayable. Textures on characters and environmental objects often failed to load, thereby creating muddied visuals. Performance proved sluggish at best. The player character randomly entered T-pose states while driving. Crashing issues halted progression. A host of other audio, graphical, and balancing troubles pervaded the title as well. Even users who own sophisticated PCs couldn't escape Cyberpunk 2077's technical shortcomings. Not long after news of the third delay hit the web, CD Projekt RED admitted that PS4 and Xbox One constituted the primary reasons for the push. Joint CEO Adam Kijinski echoed this sentiment in an emergency board meeting days after launch, revealing how the management board ignored signals suggesting the last-gen iteration needed a longer refinement period. The executive acknowledged this as the wrong approach, even addressing the fact that most of Cyberpunk 2077's marketing campaign showcased the PC version. Suffice it to say, players were unhappy, evidenced by the thousands of refund requests thrown at CD Projekt and its retail partners. While the studio invited those dissatisfied with their purchase to request reimbursements, mixed messaging about differing refund policies rocked Sony, Microsoft, and retailers. Microsoft and stores such as Best Buy and GameStop temporarily extended their respective policies. So too did Sony, a company whose digital storefront bears a notoriously strict set of refund guidelines. With Sony forced to exhibit leniency for the sake of Cyberpunk 2077, the platform holder played an unprecedented hand to deal with the situation on its own terms, delisting Cyberpunk on the PlayStation Store within a week of launch. Arguably the biggest entertainment release of 2020 would spend the next 6 months absent from a leading digital marketplace.
In honor of Saburo, Hey, stay out of the shot!
Sony and customers the world over weren't the only ones frustrated by Cyberpunk 2077's launch debacle. CD Projekt RED investors took umbrage with the state of things too. Consequently, investors filed multiple lawsuits against the Polish development house, claiming the company misled them about the readiness of Cyberpunk on base PS4 and Xbox One consoles. The New York-based Rosen law firm filed the first class action suit in December 2020. A U.S. district court in California brought forward similar complaints weeks later. In May 2021, a court consolidated these two lawsuits along with two others, which CD Projekt vowed to vigorously defend itself against. By the year's end, however, the studio settled out of court for $1.85 million, citing the cost of further legal proceedings and counsel from both sides of the aisle as the reason for such a decision. Legal woes constituted but one of the many issues that plagued CD Projekt in the year following Cyberpunk 2077's troubled arrival. The title recouped development and marketing costs ahead of launch on the back of 8 million pre-order sales, effectively covering a budget worth an estimated $328 million. Its immediate sales figures post-release weren't anything to scoff at either, considering the 13.7 million copies sold in 2020 alone. But Cyberpunk's long-term success grew skewed over time. Sales numbers on consoles suffered the biggest hit, apparent in the NPD data shared for the month of January 2021. Despite debuting at number 2 in the United States, the game's second month saw it barely crack the top 20 sales chart. While NPD stats only considered physical versions, CD Projekt later reported a 64% year-over-year profit deficit for the first quarter of 2021. Company officials referenced the PS4 delisting as a ramification of the botched premiere that would continue to impact financial results. Notably, it didn't help that the studio facilitated approximately 30,000 refund requests, minus the reimbursements governed by Microsoft, Sony, and retailers. Of course, the game's persistently broken state further compounded the Cyberpunk maker's net losses. The firm tried rectifying the situation early on, attempting to explain what went wrong before course-correcting with patches big and small. An apology video from Marcin Iwiński in January 2021 represented a mea culpa, with the executive confessing how badly CD Projekt underestimated the task of developing the experience on last-gen hardware. Apparently, the undertaking hardly seemed difficult in the beginning. As launch day drew near, Iwiński claimed significant improvements to the console iterations became a regular occurrence. And since playtesting failed to yield the glaring issues that users encountered upon release, the team believed a Day Zero update would iron out lingering errors. Allegedly, CD Projekt brass got it wrong on more than one account. A Bloomberg report based on accounts from 20 current and former Cyberpunk developers made the rounds shortly after Iwiński's apology video. According to staffers, the ambitious project suffered beneath the weight of mismanagement throughout its development, which began in 2016, then underwent an overhaul when Adam Badowski assumed the role of game director in 2018. Badovsky reportedly spearheaded the move from third to first-person gameplay. One especially debilitating problem manifested due to the studio building the engine technology and game simultaneously, a mistake developers likened to laying tracks ahead of a moving train. Mismanagement also reared its head whenever engineers voiced uncertainty about constructing Cyberpunk's complex systems on the aging PS4 and Xbox One hardware. Those who spoke with Bloomberg alleged higher-ups deliberately dismissed these concerns. Time constraints and design troubles weighed heavily on production, too. As such, several features wound up on the chopping block, including those once shown in gameplay demos like wall running and flying cars. And quite a few cuts and additions were decided upon at the tail end of development. For instance, Bloomberg sources said the broken police system came online at the last minute. Meanwhile, YouTuber Tyler McVicker's access to an unpatched version of the game unveiled numerous changes that were implemented in the 11th hour, namely with respect to the map, UI, perks, vendors, and weapon customization. Understandably, the RPG's poor state out of the box forced the company to postpone its plans for paid expansions, free DLC, and next-gen updates to instead direct all efforts towards cleaning up the core game. An initial round of patches went live during Cyberpunk's launch month, each one aimed at stabilizing the bug-ridden adventure. A few other variably sized updates touched down in subsequent weeks, but the first consequential changes arrived with the 1.2 patch deployed in March 2021, though it previously bore a February due date that CD Projekt delayed because of a targeted ransomware attack. Weighing 33 gigabytes on PC and over 40 gigabytes on console, Patch 1.2 optimized gameplay, quests, audio, cinematics, performance, and myriad other areas beset by technical abnormalities. In many respects, the rollout of the patch's 500-plus changes either engendered debilitating effects or added little in the way of gameplay improvements. Even with 1.2 installed, players continued stumbling across performance hiccups, physics-based errors, and oddities with the police system. As the production team focused on addressing persistent issues, the fabric of Cyberpunk 2077's leadership team began changing behind the scenes. Having joined the company as creative director in January 2020, Dragon Age Inquisition alum Gabriel Amatangelo was appointed Cyberpunk game director in March 2021. The new role positioned Amatangelo as the overseer of future updates and expansions, and ex-game director Adam Badovsky accepted other leadership duties amid CD Projekt's transition to a structure allowing for parallel production on multiple AAA titles. Yet, the road to fixing its biggest AAA endeavor had only just begun.
Surely that's no problem.
Several lingering glitches post-patch 1.2 were tackled in 1.21. This set of changes and those that followed heralded the RPG's long-awaited return to the PlayStation Marketplace. Sony reinstated Cyberpunk on PSN in June, citing the PlayStation community's best interests as the motivating factor for the initial removal. Its return came with a caveat, though. Notably, the platform holder warned that base PS4 owners would still experience performance issues, and thus advised customers to play on PS4 Pro or PS5. CD Projekt possessed a more positive outlook, insisting in a late June interview with Polish news channel TVN24 that Cyberpunk 2077 had achieved a satisfactory level in terms of stability, but efforts towards further optimizing the game wouldn't cease for a long time to come, and for good reason. The sci-fi adventure topped the PS4 digital sales charts in the US and Europe upon its reinstatement. Even more good tidings bubbled to the surface when patch 1.3 launched, bringing with it numerous bug fixes and free content add-ons. Of course, players were most eager to access larger pieces of free DLC and the much-delayed next-gen updates. All told, Cyberpunk 2077 finished its first year on the market better than it started. Steam data from Valve grouped the title among the best-selling and most-played games on Steam in 2021. However, the advent of patch 1.5 in February 2022 marked the biggest game-changer for CD Projekt's beleaguered adventure. Dubbed the Next Generation Update, 1.5 presented PS5 and Xbox Series users with an enhanced version of the Night City set experience, complete with ray tracing, new graphics modes, and adaptive triggers on PS5. The patch also unleashed a considerable amount of free content for all platforms, ranging from apartments to rent and character creation modifications to additional missions and cyberware upgrades. Improvements to romances, driving controls, and combat AI counted among the newly introduced changes too. Though 1.5 didn't magically erase every one of Cyberpunk's blemishes, it seemingly better reflected the development crew's original vision. Plus, its rollout gave way to the studio speaking candidly about paid content, which will come in the form of a DLC expansion in 2023. CD Projekt RED unveiled the DLC Phantom Liberty in September 2022. A spy thriller set in a previously unexplored district of Night City, Phantom Liberty will involve player character V pledging their allegiance to the new United States of America. But the content's exclusive release across Stadia, PC, PS5, and Xbox Series means 8th generation console support has officially come to an end. A notion further accentuated by the confirmation that September 2022's Edge Runners update serves as the last PS4 and Xbox One patch. As the only planned expansion for Cyberpunk 2077, it stands to reason Phantom Liberty will usher in the game's final curtain call. And CD Projekt's sidelining of the Red engine that powered Cyberpunk, along with abandoning the technology's multiplayer R&D efforts, indicates online features for the game may never see the light of day. Blame for what went awry won't soon cease being passed around. In June 2022, a whistleblower from Romanian quality assurance company Quantic Lab told Upper Echelon Games that Cyberpunk 2077 hit a rough patch in late 2019. Allegedly, CD Projekt hired Quantic Lab for its QA-related expertise, believing veteran testers would help pinpoint the game's problem areas. The insiders said junior testers were assigned instead, unbeknownst to the Cyberpunk crew. Strict quotas from Quantic Lab executives reportedly exacerbated the issue, culminating in negligible errors too often taking priority and disrupting productivity. In speaking with VGC, the QA company's CEO Stefan Sakarescu didn't explicitly deny allegations that CD Projekt was misled, but said reports on the matter featured inaccuracies and exhibited a misunderstanding about the QA process. The development crew refused to publicly address the rumor when approached by VGC. Given the number of unsubstantiated reports and subsequent denials that surround Cyberpunk 2077, specifics regarding its failures may stay buried for a long time to come. But one thing seems abundantly clear. The Polish developer took a mighty blow to its once sterling reputation. CD Projekt's stock fell multiple times post-Cyberpunk 2077. Its market cap, which previously made it the most valuable games company in Europe, hit a low in 2022 that may have turned Dying Light creator Techland into Poland's biggest gaming firm. Many would argue Cyberpunk 2077 is slowly rounding the curve though, trending towards a path that places the launch controversy in the rearview mirror. Such forward momentum comes courtesy of the so-called Netflix boost, wherein the release of a new show or movie on the streaming platform significantly improves the sales of adopted media. CD Projekt experienced the phenomenon with The Witcher 3 following the premiere of Netflix's The Witcher Season 1 in 2019. The streaming giant's deployment of the acclaimed Cyberpunk Edge Runners anime has similarly benefited Cyberpunk 2077. Within approximately 10 days of the anime's debut, Cyberpunk 2077 surpassed The Witcher 3's all-time concurrent players peak on Steam. The futuristic RPG also enjoyed consecutive players' growth for 7 days straight, once more securing the #1 spot on Steam's Best Sellers chart. This No Man's Sky-like redemption arc demonstrates that millions of new and returning users have given Cyberpunk 2077 a second chance, one the studio would do well not to squander when unleashing Phantom Liberty in 2023. As things currently stand then, only time will tell if CD Projekt RED can ever truly recover from one of the most surprising blunders in industry history. Thank you for watching. We'd like to take this time to thank, by name, the generous patrons who have pledged to our Hall of Fame reward tier: Alex Moretti, and those currently subscribed to our producer reward tier: Brock Piviroto, Darirap Sigurdsson, GetWrecked.com, Kira May, Landy K. Hayes, Mario Herrera, Milkshake. If you enjoy our content, please consider subscribing to our channel. and backing us on Patreon.